What's up everyone, this is Andre from Indie Arts Midwest, and in this video we're going to set up a control rig for the motorcycle that we worked on in the previous video. So let's go ahead and get started. Since I've already set up an armature for the spring, I'm going to deselect that as it is parented to an armature so that I can scale the armature as well as everything else down, and by default the spring will scale down along with it. So I'm going to start with 0.1 and I will go another 0.5 scale down, and then Shift C followed by Shift S, and I'm just going to line it up here on the X-axis. Looks pretty good. Great. I'm going to go ahead and save right quick. Alright, so I'll select the body and we're going to add a curve circle type and scale it up times 6, or just slightly bigger than the motorcycle you're setting up for control. Alright, next I'm going to shift duplicate the circle and scale it by 0.5, and I'm going to move it up a little bit. And I'll take a look at it here, and I'm just going for roughly the same height as the bike. Obviously it's a little bit bigger, and that's totally fine. Alright, so I'm going to select the second circle and we are going to Control A to set its rotation, which now gives it a forward direction. Next we'll apply the location to the body of our bike, which will give us the proper lean that we need, so that when we go to use our lean controller, it will have an axis that is controllable based on that pivot point. And select the handlebars. Shift S, cursor to selected, and we're going to Shift A and add another Bezier circle, which I'll just scale up a little bit. Take a look here, and I'll scale it up a little more. Yeah, I think that's better. Alright, so at this point I guesstimated the rotation angle that I needed, so I just kind of pushed R and looked at the values in the upper left corner, and based on that I just came up with a rotation of minus 24.69, and it seems like a pretty good angle for this handlebar rotation. It's not perfect, but it is close enough. Next I'll select the wheel, the lower fork, and the handlebars last, and Control P to parent to object. With that, we will now give our new circle mesh a custom name, which I have as steer_control. Then we'll add a transformation object constraint. Set it to steer control. Extrapolate world space, local space. Map from will set to rotation. Min on the z-axis is 0. Max is minus 360. Map 2 will also set to rotation with a min of 0 on the z-axis and a max of minus 360. Test it out. Next, we need to limit the rotation of our steer controller. We will add another object constraint of limit rotation. We will check X, and on the y-axis you will set it to whatever you decided the rotation angle of your steer controller is. So in my case it is 24.69, so I'm entering minus 24.69 for min and minus 24.69 for max. And Blender rounds it up to 24.7. So I'll just test out the other rotation angles, and it should only work for the Z. And obviously remember that you can set rotation limits if you would like, depending on if you want the handlebars to only turn so far to the left or right. So that's completely up to you. I didn't feature that in the video, but just keep in mind you could use a limit rotation on the z-axis in order to ensure that it doesn't turn too far in either direction. So feel free to add that if you like. It's not very hard. And let's move on. Next, I would like to create a type of counter steer effect using our second circle object. So I'll add a transformation constraint. We'll select the circle object, extrapolate, world space, local space, and map to rotation. On the map from, I want mine to have a bit more sway. So I'm setting the z-axis to 21 min and minus 21 max. And on the map 2 rotation, I'm setting the z-axis to 26 min and minus 26 max. And I'll go ahead and test it out. It looks good. Select the body, add another transformation constraint, which we will set to our lean controller. Extrapolate, world to local space, map from rotation, map to rotation. On the x-axis, min 45 and max minus 45. On the map to x-axis, 45 min and minus 45 max. Nice. And test that. We'll add a transformation object constraint and set it to the lean controller. I'm going to give the primary circle shape a custom name, main control, and finally name this lean control. World space, local space, our map from rotation. On the z-axis, I'm setting 16 min and minus 16 max. And for the map 2, set to rotation, z-axis. And for the z-axis, I started with minus 6 and a max of 6, and eventually moved up to a minus 8 min and 8 max, just to give a bit more of the swivel effect as the lean controller guides the steer control. Now, as I said earlier in the video, there will be certain parts of your process where you'll have to come up with your own settings in order to get things working. And this is why I didn't leave this particular part out, so that you could see how I had to go through some settings in order to get the right rotation for the wheels. All right, so now that you've seen that, let's move on, and I will parent the lean control to the main control so that they move around together. We're going to select the front wheel and add a transformation object constraint. We're going to have our target be the main controller. Extrapolate local to local. On map from, we're going to set the location for 1.4 min and minus 1.4 max. Map 2, we set rotation, and we're going to change things up a little bit by setting the X source to Y, the Y source to X, and then we will leave Z at Z. For Y, we will leave 0.0, and we will now set the X to 360 min and minus 360 max. While the map 2 information is absolutely correct, feel free to tweak the map from settings in order to get the type of rotation that you would prefer for the render you're setting up. So now we'll do the same thing for the rear wheel. Transform object constraint, main controller, extrapolate, local to local. For the location, map from minimum, we will set to, and for the max, -3, or whatever setting you would prefer for this particular part of the setup. And the main map 2 with the YXZ sources changed. And for the X, we will set 360 min and minus 360 max. And there we have it. Cool, so we have functioning wheels. And I just want to rotate lean control and see how the wheels function that way. And they look pretty good to me. I'll try it the other way. Seems all right. And these are all default settings, of course. So let's set up the wheelie. But keep in mind, you can also hide this effect so that you can use it whenever you want rather than having its effects pop up all the time. That has a lot to do with the fact that it's still tied to the main controller, so that when it rotates, the effect could have a negative effect on the animation. So as I said before, just use it as needed, but also have it as a good option. All right, so we need one more Bezier circle, so we'll Shift A, add that, and then we'll rotate 90 on the Z axis. I'm going to select this rear wheel, Shift S cursor to selected, and then select our circle, and Shift S selection to cursor. I'm going to scale it up by 2. Next, we'll select the body and add a transformation object constraint. And set the target to our circle. Extrapolate, world to local space. Map from rotation, we're going to set the Y to 14.8 min and minus 14.8 max. But as I said, be sure to keep in mind that these settings can be less or more depending on the scale of your bike. And map 2, we will set to rotation for the Y axis minus 45 min and 45 max. So we have the rotation there. So it's not perfect, but it's at least a good start for the wheelie setup. And then I just want to limit the rotation at a constraint and select the y-axis, and I will set the min to 0 and the max to 45. In the next video, we will focus on a dynamic suspension setup, also using constraints.